a better place in the community. Jimmy has never been to school, only the local occupation authority. But now he is to be trained to take his place as an adult. Whilst Jimmy lives at home, other defectives do not even have this advantage. The local mental hospital is their home. Some have been there as long as 20 years. Now these men are leaving hospital to start a new type of training, which it is hoped is going to open up a new horizon for people suffering from this type of handicap. The Arthur's Industrial Centre in Oldham was opened in 1955, particularly for low-grade mental defectives. Up to this time, it had been considered that this type of low-grade patient was unemployable, and consequently, many were admitted to mental deficiency hospitals. Here at this industrial centre, a graduated system of training is used to develop the manual dexterity of each person. The tasks are wide and varied, but each is designed to teach the defective to work diligently on simple jobs. They are graduated from those requiring close supervision to where they are ultimately left to work entirely on their own. John here is making concrete posts. All the operations are done by this low-grade defective to the completed article. The defectives are taught to handle fast-moving machinery and appreciate its dangers. All factories install some type of moving machinery, and if they are to take their place in industry, they must be accustomed to it. It is now possible to apply training to economic benefit. Tom has been set to solder together television components. These are all men. Are there no girls and adult females of the same grade who could be so trained? These adult girls are in the occupation centre, trying to adjust their lives to children much smaller and younger than themselves. But are they ever to grow up? In these pleasant surroundings, they are undoubtedly cared for, and no real burden to their parents. But they are merely passing their time and using their few talents to no real purpose. These girls are no lower in grade or mentality than the men we have already seen, but they are not being trained to a useful end. Could they not be earning some reward like the men and finding more satisfaction in industrial work than in these less purposeful forms of occupational therapy? The need for the facilities for training young adult women in the same way as the men became very apparent, and the council were not slow to recognise this as an urgent matter. The Mental Health Subcommittee of the Oldham Borough had previously asked for general details of the possibilities of providing such a centre for adult women. The officers of the Health Department for the past few months have been preparing possible plans and detailed reports, and today the chairman of the Health Committee is to explain these in detail to the committee. The possibility of extension had always been considered when the office centre was born, and now the suggestion is put to the committee that the female centres shall be linked with the male centre on the same site. The chairman explains that a unique suggestion has been made that this centre should depart from the usual type of building and consist of prefabricated concrete units. The committee members show intense interest in these. Finally, the chairman asks for a vote, and the committee unanimously agrees to proceed with the building of the centre. Training in the male centre has proceeded satisfactorily for a year and a half. But now here is an excellent opportunity in the building of this new centre to give training under practical industrial conditions and accustom these men to the discipline of work. Here, the mental welfare officer, who for so long has only observed these men at home, now has the opportunity of instructing, observing, and helping these men in their training. Even in the early stages of preparatory building work, it was found that these severely handicapped men can carry out a definite task with a very minimum of supervision. And Jimmy, our Mongol, proves that he can work entirely on his own. Granville, also very handicapped, works excellently with the tradesman bricklayer. This man, who was 40 years in a mental hospital, soon learned to operate a machine and mix concrete on his own for his teammates to deliver to the builders. The vision of using prefabricated concrete units is now taking material shape. These were prefabricated homes built in the immediate post-war years and which are no longer required as emergency housing. To build this centre in traditional fashion, to contain 4 wings with 4,000 square feet of floor space, would have cost in the region of £30,000. The cost of this centre will be only £10,000. The precast concrete slabs which originally formed the walls of the prefab houses are now being re-erected and bolted together to form the outer walls of our centre. This type of construction lends itself to the use of unskilled labour and so provides us with an excellent opportunity for the training of the mentally handicapped. The floorboards are also taken from the prefabs. Our friend Jimmy throws himself wholeheartedly into the job, though he will insist on attempting to work on his own. But even Jimmy must have assistance in placing into position a large window complete with glass. Jimmy, however, has the last word and tries to show the good-natured foreman joiner how to drill a hole. The nature of the site requires a great deal of excavation. This is laborious work, but the men respond with a will and a great deal of determination. This is man's work. In all, it is estimated that over 100 tons of earth were removed from the building site. Mechanization did not stop the defectives assisting. In fact, work with machines interested them all the more. Working with individual machines then led to the teaching of another all-important aspect, working as a team. This particular team worked for many weeks with very little supervision, providing mixed concrete for the skilled workers on the site. By now, the lower grades can be left to complete their tasks. Those who have responded even better in their training assist artisans on their own. During the course of the building of the centre, many people showed a great deal of interest in the scheme. The Mayor of Oldham, Alderman Lyson, with an officer of the department, visited the site and watched the defectives at work. He was not the only visitor during this time. A team of 6 leading United States psychiatrists visited and expressed the view that there was no training for defectives of this type in the United States. In fact, the Oldham concept was in advance of American ideas. Building has now been going on for 3 months, and the centre is beginning to take shape. The internal fittings have now to be completed. Now the training has begun to pay dividends. Men are able to do tasks which before were considered impossible. This man had spent 4 years in a mental deficiency hospital. 6 months after the centre was completed, he was working and earning £8 a week. Joe, a defective, who was also a psychiatric patient, is responding well to this method of rehabilitation. The lower grades continued the work of general excavation for the boiler house. This was the biggest task of all. But a new aspect comes to light. Jimmy, our mongrel, has watched the building foreman so long that he thinks he can take over his job. He certainly seems to have the right ideas. But not even Jimmy can keep the men on the job when the tea break comes around. It's just a question of down tools. And when tea break is over, a man is entitled to a quiet smoke. Confidence in the ability to carry on one's own is growing day by day. These men certainly are now standing on their own feet, not being supported at every turn. They have become very ambitious, and here we see Joe laying the foundations of a new chicken house. This was badly needed for the growing flock of hens, and before the centre was completed, a chicken run had been built entirely by one supervisor and the trainees. But now, back to work on the centre again. The mentally handicapped, far from being unsuitable for work, can carry out a great number of tasks which many employees find disagreeable. Here is a great potential source of labour in an age when no one wants to do the dull and uninteresting job. Such a job as this, insulating the walls of the building. Or this one, insulating the walls of the building with glass fibre. This is one which the mentally handicapped can tackle without boredom or distress. Now the trainees can see the end in sight. They are preparing the trenches for the large electricity service that has to go into the centre. All is bustle and activity, and there is a feeling of satisfaction in the air. Jimmy is still at the centre of operations. And is now busy totalling up the probable cost of the job. Another distinguished visitor was Mr. Dennis Vosper, the then Minister of Health. After seeing the centres, he had this to say: "No longer is this country going to regard mental illness as a sort of disease or race apart. But it is going to be something to be dealt with as part of the normal way of life. It seems clear to me that there must be a shift in emphasis away from hospital towards the local authority. That is not an easy thing to suggest to a local authority who has not been doing this work. But you can show them that without undue expenditure of effort or funds, you can do an enormous amount to relieve the burdens on the hospital and to relieve the anxieties of those who are afflicted with relations or friends who suffer from mental illness or mental deficiency." Joe is given the task of putting the final touches to the outside paths and roadways, a job at which he is by now quite expert. The building of the centre has been completed as cheaply as possible, but only the finest equipment has been provided. A complete laundry is being installed, an all-electric one. This will be the machine room of the Female Industrial Centre. As the last machine goes in, the centre is near completion. And Jimmy is having the final word again, taking the last central heating pipe into the centre. The building is now complete and ready for occupation by the many girls awaiting this type of training. The pattern of training follows that of the male centre, but the work is naturally not quite as heavy. Initial training is in finger movement and the ability to do one process after another, and above all, the discipline of work. These girls, within weeks of being in the centre, are actually earning money by making carrier bags. These two girls are the same girls who, in the beginning of the film, were merely passing their time. Domestic training takes up a great deal of the time. These girls will make excellent domestics when they have been given sufficient training. The laundry is the machine shop of the female centre. Here, at the height of their training, they have to work as though they were an industry. They can earn up to £5 a week in the centre, but the main aim, just as in the men's centre, is to train them to go out into the community to work, not to stay in sheltered employment if this can be avoided. centre is complete and operating. These are the places where the mentally handicapped can the right to live in the community.